the quick take on, I'm not going to answer all the questions essentially. I gave you an idea what to focus on. If something is not in the study guide, as I always say, it's not going to be on the exam. If you find disparity, bring it up. I'll correct it. For all microbes that we have covered, all bacteria that we have covered in that 24, 25 slides, gram-positive or gram-negative. Okay? And I'm going to give you few hints, like some of them are undoubtedly gram-positive. Clostridia, bacilli, streptococci, listeria, gram-positive. Okay. So when I say main diseases, like recognize things like impetigo or carbuncles or furuncles. Okay. What do these guys do? Okay, how they contribute to the skin conditions? They destroy the tissue and letting skin to peel off. Does that make sense? They destroy the extracellular matrix, or they destroy the collagen and tissues disassembling. Subcutaneous tissue, it's pretty much necrotizing fasciitis that we described. So far makes sense? TSST, toxic shock, okay. Mechanism, hyperimmune response. When it becomes bacteremic, respiratory condition, it's pharyngitis, infections of the upper respiratory tract, skeletal osteomyelitis, cardiovascular endocarditis. Can it be part of the microbiome? Yes. Where? Respiratory system, transmission routes, contact and respiratory. I'm pretty much reiterating what we've already discussed. So I'll try to do it less. UTIs, obviously the transmission is mostly sexual, okay. Staph Epidermidis in the skin, if it's... Now, obviously I kind of guide you to the answer in the questions like, is it pathogenic? If yes, well, and yeah, it can be in immunocompromised patients. Does that make sense? Cutaneous, you know what cutaneous means? Skin, associated with skin. So we're talking about impetigo, erysipelas, and so on. Which factors can possibly contribute to them? Virulence factors. I make it a little bit like you have to take it to the next step. You have to think, okay, it's probably things that destroy extracellular matrix. Same hyaluronidase, okay, or exfoliative toxin. They all also can be found in the streptococci. Does that make sense? So similar enzymes, but in Streptococcus. Does it have superantigens? Yes, it does. Can they cause the same toxic shock syndrome? Okay. It's the role for streptolysin. It induces hemolysis. Okay. So it kind of answers this question. If Streptococcus is hemolytic, then we can determine it using blood agar. The complications of the typical strep throat infection, what I want you to know is rheumatic fever and what's that? Scarlet fever. Okay. For rheumatic fever, it's going to be bone and joints, joints and heart, transmission route, respiratory and contact. For strep pneumonia, well, it's really simple. All you have to know for this, pneumococcal meningitis, pneumococcal pneumonia, respiratory transmission, you do have a vaccine. Am I clear? Am I clear? Awesome. Strep galactiae. Neonatal meningitis can be a component of the microbiome. Why adults, healthy adults, do not have same disease as like kids? Because kids, as well as elderly and immunocompromised patients do not have a proper immune system. Does that make sense? So understand that idea. When I ask which cohorts of patients are susceptible, immunocompromised, whether they're kids that are naturally immunocompromised or sick patients. Am I clear? Let me know if you have any questions, please. And of course, you can ask them tomorrow. Okay. I'm skipping any gram staining issues. You can find it there. Virulence factor that allows it to survive. If you see harsh environmental conditions, that's what? Endospore, period. Bacillus cereus, food poisoning. Is this infection? Food poisoning. Is this infection? No, it is not. It is what it is? It's not toxemia. Intoxication, yes. It is caused by a toxin that is produced. Right? So this is intoxication. Intoxication is when we take the toxin in. Are we clear on that? Lovely. Bacillus anthracis, self-explanatory. Believe me, I'm not going to ask you what does Bacillus anthracis cause, because it's going to cause anthrax and you can answer it right off the bat based on the name of the bug. So don't expect it to be there, okay? Forms: respiratory form, cutaneous form, intestinal form. Therefore, transmission: respiratory, contact, and oral. It's not fecal oral, just consume contaminated meat, okay? Zoonotic, yes. Reservoir. I will not ask you to choose between cattle and reindeer, obviously, because they all can be. But if I ask you, okay, is it cattle, snakes, or rodents? It's cattle. Okay? Clostridium. Mechanism of toxins. Listen to me. I listen to myself. Let's all remember I told you that. Mechanisms of toxins. I do not ask for much, but Clostridium botulinum. Flaccid paralysis because ACH is not released at the neuromuscular junction. Clostridium tetani. Well, we kind of, they're all going to be toxins. All virulence factors are toxins. You don't have to know the exact name, like botulism toxin or alpha toxin for Clostridium perfringens. No. But you have to understand. Question? You have to understand it's a toxin, and like Clostridium botulinum, ACH, inhibition of ACH release, Clostridium tetani, inhibition of the muscle inhibition, Clostridium perfringens, alpha toxin that destroys the cells. That's all we covered. Clostridium difficile, toxin that also kills the cells, induces cell death. Understand whether antibiotics for the disease that is caused by toxin, would antibiotics help? Largely. They would not. I mean, they probably would be used, but the efficiency will be limited. What is the main treatment for toxemia? Anti-toxin, yep, antitoxin. Like tetanus shot, botulism shot. Okay, understand that. Transmission, botulism, botulinum perfringens, tetany, soil dwelling. Conditions that they cause. Perfringens, understand the idea. It's anaerobic. Oxygen treatment. Okay. Clostridium difficile. Would antibiotics help? Why? How is it transmitted? What causes superinfection? What causes C. diff superinfection? antibiotic treatment that wipe out the normal microbiome. Cool. Moving on. In adults, gastroenteritis. In infants, Listeria monocytogenes causes meningitis, right? Transmission, oral, bacteriophage kills the Listeria. That's all that answered. How are they used? They kill it, okay? What are the challenges? Well, we covered it today also. Resistance, specificity, it's all those issues. Mycobacteria, few things that I want to remind you. What structure of the cell wall do they have formally? Huh? Mycolic acid on the outside, but other than that, if you compare it to, like, is it gram-positive or gram-negative? Formally. Structure, not the staining, structure. I pictured it for you. I remember that vividly. Gram-positive, yes. So it's a membrane and thick cell wall. Different story. On the outside, they still have mycolic acid. That's why they are not stained by gram-positive. You gotta use acid-fast, okay? So structurally, they are closer to gram-positive, okay? What are common virulence factors for all mycobacteria? Capsule and intracellular replication. Very good. Very good. Brilliant. Okay. What makes them resistant to intracellular replication?
They have, like, through the process they go through, they form that fibrous cyst around that prevents them from, like, essentially, like, they armor up, they can't get into it.
Well, it's not them. It's actually your body that forms fibrin encasing. But what makes them, like, if they get into the macrophage should destroy them. Why? Mycolic acid protects them from destruction. Does that make sense? You can technically consider mycolic acid also a virulence factor. Okay. Leprosy, granulomatous form, lepromatous form. Lepromatous is more severe. Can it be treated? Yes. Antibiotics, super effective. Transmission route, contact mostly, can be respiratory. It is zoonotic from armadillos. Mycobacterium avium, bird droppings. Immunocompromised are more susceptible. Transmission route, inhalation of bird droppings. Okay. We very briefly discussed it, and in terms of what does it cause, the disease similar to tuberculosis. Okay. Tuberculosis, which cells? Macrophages happen to infected cells. That's what Jason was referring to. Formation of that necrotic core encased in the fibrin. That's the granuloma. Okay. Surrounds granuloma. Fibrin. What causes most of the symptoms? Your immune system. Does that make sense? Kind of trying to go decent pace. Is tuberculosis highly infectious? Yes. So it infects easily. Do all people develop the disease? No, about 5% of infected. Okay. What makes transmission easier? Huh? So lack of sanitation and crowdedness. Okay. The symptoms, again, exams are not descriptive. So you have to recognize, if I'm telling you that the symptom of tuberculosis is bleeding from your ears, it is not. But if I tell you night sweats and cough, okay, then yes. Does that make sense? Like, there are no GI symptoms associated. It's respiratory. Okay, fatigue, night sweats, cough. Extrapulmonary miliary tuberculosis. Tuberculosis outside of the lungs. What does it affect? Practically everything, starting from the heart to bones to kidneys to the brain. Is there a vaccine? Yes, it is not used in the US because of its partial effectiveness. Think about this. Use the vaccine, you cannot possibly detect whether the person had tuberculosis or did not have tuberculosis. Does that make sense? You can't tell apart the vaccine versus vaccine exposure versus tuberculosis exposure. Like, I had a vaccine. As far as I know, I never had tuberculosis. I was never infected. If you will test me, I will come out positive because I was vaccinated when I was a child. That makes sense? Okay. Antibiotic resistance. When I say discuss, it means the reasons. What is the main reason why Mycobacterium is so resistant? When we get treated for TB, well, ideally, how long does it take? Yeah. People not complain. That's it. That's all it takes. Nocardia, weakly gram-positive, partially acid-fast, so acid-fast staining. The most common disease associated with nocardia steroides. It's pulmonary infection. Okay. So that's settings, nosocomial settings, transmission routes, respiratory, contact from fomites. C. diphtheria. Now, well, diphtheria symptoms, pseudomembrane. Understand what forms pseudomembrane. Dead cells, bacterial, white blood cells, and epithelial cells. Effects of the toxin. When I say effects of the toxin, I mean it inhibits the translation, killing the cells. Do we have a vaccine? Yes, we do. Pneumocystis israeli, subcutaneous infections, and endocarditis. Okay? Immunocompromised patients are most susceptible. It can be found in the environment and as a part of human microbiome, especially in the mouth. I think it's a bird right there. I think so. So in the mouth. Okay. Gardnerella associated with bacterial vaginosis. Proposed mechanism. Remember we discussed the antibiotic treatment, decrease in lactobacilli numbers in the vaginal microbiome, and Gardnerella starts to proliferate. Where can you find? Know where are they? Okay. Are they? Yes, they are components of human microbiome. Know where you're going to find them. Like the question that you've got. That makes sense? Cool about that? Common diseases caused by E. Enterococcus faecalis. Sepsis, urinary tract infections. Okay. I want you to focus more on the drug resistance. Why these microbes that are in the human microbiome so drug resistant? They are constantly exposed to the drugs, right? Transmission route, nosocomial route, contact route, fecal-oral route. A nutrient source for P. acnes, sebum. Why does it start to replicate in large quantities during puberty? Because we produce a lot of sebum during puberty. What does it cause? Acne. Micrococcus luteus, it's not a primary pathogen. Immunocompromised, are susceptible, can cause mostly wound infections and sepsis in severely immunocompromised people. Unique structural feature of mycoplasma, we just answered that question, lack of cell wall. Which diseases It's obviously the typo here in the class. Okay. Which diseases? We talked about walking pneumonia, infection with Mycoplasma pneumonia, and sexually transmitted Mycoplasma genitalium that causes cervicitis, infection of the fallopian tubes, and may lead to pelvic inflammatory disease. Okay. Where in the human body you can find bifidobacterium and lactobacilli? Components of vaginal microbiome, bifidobacteria, lactobacilli also can be found in the gut. Foods, not so much with bifidobacteria, lactobacilli, all lactic fermentation. Okay. What is the role of probiotics? I always feel like an idiot when I write a question like this. The answer is they are probiotics. That's it. No, seriously, that's it. Leuconostoc, not probiotic, can be pathogenic in immunocompromised patients. Foods, again, foods that are produced by lactic fermentation. That's the answer to this question. Does that make sense? The what? It doesn't? Wait, what? Erin is first. Go ahead. What I just said that leuconostoc and lactobacilli are pretty much associated with the foods that are produced by lactic fermentation, like kimchi or beer is both lactic alcoholic, kefir, cheese, yogurt, so on and so forth. Does that make sense? Leuconostoc can be pathogen. Mia, question? Okay. So the answer for this would be fermentation. Bartonella Hansley, cat scratch fever. Transmission route, cats. Ticks also, cats. Bartonella quintana causes trench fever. Transmission is lice. Brucella abortus, brucellosis, from cattle, contact route. It's kind of, so these guys cause fairly non-specific fever. Common for Rickettsia, Coxiella, and Ehrlichia. What's common for them? Intracellular pathogens. Rickettsia, different species cause a number of diseases we discussed. Typhus, Rocky Mountain spotted fever, and rickettsial pox. Coxiella causes the Q fever, and Ehrlichia causes ehrlichiosis. Ehrlichia, kind of discuss it here. Transmission route. What's common between all rickettsial infections? What is the transmission route? They are, what transmits them? Vectors from animals. Yes, they're zoonotic, and they are vector transmitted. Mites, lice, fleas, ticks. Okay, same goes for Coxiella, ticks. Same goes for Ehrlichia, ticks. Does that make sense? Okay. Virulence factor that allows the harsh environmental conditions means anospore. There you go. Ehrlichia, ehrlichiosis. Chlamydia trachomatis. What is the unique feature of replication? Where does it replicate? In cell. Chlamydiasis in newborns, it's trachoma, chlamydial infection of the eyes. Bardotella pertussis. Mechanism. When I say mechanism, cilia is destroyed or are destroyed. Mucus is not expelled. It causes that whooping cough. Okay. Virulence factors, toxins. Okay. Pertussis toxin, for instance. I don't ask you to remember all of them. Transmission route respiratory. We do have a vaccine. 3 stages of disease. Catarrhal stage. when we have common cold symptoms, paroxysmal stage, when we actually have a cough, and convalescent stage, when we get better. Do antibiotics help? Usually not so much, because when the infection enters paroxysmal stage, the microbe is practically gone. Okay? Another name for Neisseria meningitidis, meningococcus. Clinical feature that allows to distinguish Neisseria meningitidis from other meningitis diseases. Petechia. Vaccine? We do. Transmission route, respiratory. Neisseria gonorrhea, and conjunctivitis. Transmission routes, contacts, and sexual. Enterobacteriaceae, which diseases they commonly cause. For any bacteria that are enteric commensals or gut commensals, you have to think UTI first and foremost. Okay, urinary tract infection. Enterobacter, Klebsiella can cause pneumonia. All of them can cause sepsis in some instances. All of them, if they outgrow others, can cause diarrheal diseases. Okay. What guides the treatment options? Antibiotic sensitivity, yes. Transmission routes, fecal oral. And also, when we say nosocomial, it means people share the toilet, so, it comes out of the rear end and then ends up in the urethra, for example. Does that make sense? EHEC, enterohemorrhagic E. coli, disease, diarrhea and dysentery with the potential for hemolytic uremic syndrome. Okay? Can you find E. coli in general in the human microbiome? Yes. Major source of EHEC, food. Virulence factors responsible. This one, I want you to focus on Shigella toxins. Dysentery, blood in the stool, which disease can E. coli cause in newborns, just generally E. coli. Neonatal meningitis. Urinary tract infections, yes. Urinary tract infections are common. E. coli is the main cause. Other types of E. coli, one quick answer, diarrhea. All right? Does that make sense? For GI syndromes, transmission route is fecal oral. For urinary tract infections, it is a contact transmission in nosocomial settings. People touch fomites, then touch their private parts. There you go. Does that make sense? Shigella, Shigellosis. Mechanism of the toxin action. It kills cells. It inhibits protein synthesis and kills cells. Does that make sense? That's all you have to know about the toxin. Fecal oral transmission. Salmonella causes salmonellosis, which is mild, or typhoid or paratyphoid fever, which is more severe. It can be carried asymptomatically. Vibrio vulnificus, wound infections and septicemia. It can replicate outside of the host, okay? And the transmission route is usually by contact when you swim in the brackish water. It requires salt, okay? Cholera toxin stimulates production of cyclic AMP, okay? Which then signals the pumps and the carriers to start secreting things into the lumen of intestine, like water and chloride and sodium and potassium, causing diarrhea. Okay. What contributes the most to the transmission of this disease? Lack of sanitation, proper treatment. How filtration, remember we discussed that issue? When you filter, you remove copypods to which cholera, Vibrio cholerae, sticks. Okay, Yersinia enterocolitica, it's sepsis, digestive infections. It's a zoonotic disease. It's orphan infection because it's also often overlooked. Yersinia pestis, plague. Which forms do we know? Bubonic and pulmonary or respiratory plague. We also sometimes mention septicemic plague, which means microbe starts to replicate in the blood. You have to understand which form of disease is more deadly. It's pneumonic form. Iron. What is the role of iron in the Yersinia pestis infection? Huge. Yersinia pestis depends on iron. Okay. Transmission cycle. If it's pneumonic, it's pretty obvious. It's respiratory. But if it's a bubonic plague, then it's going to be fleas that bite humans and fleas that just recently beat something else. Does that make sense? Is Yersinia pestis in the US? Yes. We have zoonotic foci. Francisella tularensis, contact and respiratory transmission. Respiratory form is the most severe form. Which animals? Anyone remembers? Huh? Mostly rabbits. For some reason it just loves rabbits. Vaccines for Yersinia and Francisella. Are they available? Yes or no? Okay, let me rephrase it. Are there vaccines, just not necessarily for you, available for you, but are there vaccines against the plague and tularemia? Yes. Do we use them? No, we do not use them. And I may ask you, for instance, there are vaccines for Francisella tularensis and Yersinia pestis, but you do not get one during the normal vaccination schedule. Why? You're not exposed to it. Very good. What if you are a shepherd that has a herd of prairie dogs? I'm not asking why you have a herd of prairie dogs, but imagine you are a shepherd in Arizona. Are you going to get the plague vaccine? Yes. In fact, I believe that maybe, people who, I can't think of any profession like that, but people who communicate closely with animals that have a potential to carry plague, they probably get vaccinated. Does that make sense? Pseudomonas aeruginosa. Focus on cutaneous infections. Knowing about green nail syndrome and erythema gangrenosum is a lovely quality, but I want you to focus on puruginosa, causes the cutaneous disease and also lung disease. Okay, that makes sense. Drug resistance. Can we consider it a virulence factor? Oh yes. Is it drug resistant? Pseudomonas. Notoriously drug resistant. Okay. You're not going to get questions which of these microbes has higher drug resistance. So come on. But just think about it. Okay? Good. Transmission routes. Contact fomites, respiratory, there are plenty of routes. Legionella pneumophila. Is there a communicable disease? Legionellosis. Is it a communicable? No, it is not. Which cells does it infect? I should say in the human body. Which cells in the human body does this bacteria infect? Macrophages. In the wild, it infects amoeba. We have our own amoeba, which are macrophages. Transmission route, respiratory. Haemophilus influenza, can you find it in the human body? Can it be a component of microbiome? Some people, yes. It's upper respiratory tract. Okay. Diseases from otitis media to the meningitis. Transmission route is respiratory. Do we have a vaccine? Campylobacter jejuni. Find it in jejunum. Understand, causes Guillain-Barré, it's autoimmune disease. The mechanism, antigens from bacteria for our immune system. They look exactly like human antigens. So when immune system responds to bacterial antigens, it then looks around and says, there are other antigens, but they unfortunately located in human cells. That makes sense? It develops the immune response to the bug, and then those same antibodies and T cells start to attack human tissues because they are look-alike. Infection transmission, sources of infection, poultry. Transmission routes, fecal-oral. H. pylori. Gastric ulcer. It does ulcer. When I say what does it do to the stomach epithelium, inflammation. You have inflammation, constant chronic inflammation destroys the epithelium, forming ulcer. How does it prove that gastric ulcer is the infectious disease? That it is caused by bacteria? Of course, Warren drank it, but what else? How do we treat it? Antibiotics. Antibiotics help, which means their bacteria are, replication of microbes is involved. That makes sense? Treponema pallidum. Syphilis. What are the 3 stages? Number 1, number 2, number 3. Primary, secondary, tertiary. Primary, chancre, infective. Secondary, mostly rash, infective. Tertiary, tissue infections, deep tissue infection, non-infectious. I don't know what happened to me here. I have no idea. I didn't notice it. How did this thing replicate in the third? Where? In the tissues. Why it is hard to see the microbe and other spirochetes with a regular bright field microscopy? Not only spiral, what else? They really thin, they really tight. They may be long, but they thin. Transmission route sexual. Borrelia burgdorferi, Lyme. First sign of the disease, bullseye rash or erythema migrans. Transmission route, ticks. Okay. From it's zoonotic disease. Why is it hard to treat when the disease progresses? It's in the joints. It's really hard to reach. It's in the tissues. It's really deep. You can hardly reach it. Anything that goes deep in the tissues is really hard to reach. Bless you. Leptospira interrogans causes leptospirosis. Generally, it's mild, but in some cases can produce Weyl syndrome, which is characterized by the vascular collapse, liver and spleen failure. Reservoirs, cats, dogs, various domestic animals. Zoonotic, well, obviously, yes. Before we'll wrap up this, do you have any questions about the study guide? What, you are overwhelmed, are you? Yes, you are. That's normal for biology. Those of you who took AP2, think about AP2 and feel better. Respiratory. It's respiratory without any argument. Did you take AP2? With whom? Oh, then yeah. Those of you who took it with Dr. Nussbaum feel relieved. That's he gives a lot. It's intense. Or Dr. Landis for that matter. They great teachers, but it's a lot. So okay.